Good evening, citizens, council, and staff. I call the City Council meeting of April 4th, 2017 to order. Clerk Hefner, can you call the roll?
Mayor Beckman?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Brinkman? Here. Councilmember Cernanik?
Present.
Councilmember Clark?
Happily present.
Councilmember Cole? Here. Councilmember Hopping? Councilmember Valdez?
Present.
Will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It was noted that Councilmember Hopping is not here tonight. The reason that he's not here is the Arapahoe County Commissioners are having a hearing over in the county building in regards to property that is at the corner of Platte Canyon and Bowles. And it is a piece of property that, although it's in the county, it has access to transportation lanes there that are part of the city, and it affects the neighboring community quite a lot. So on behalf of the citizens over in his district, he is there to attend that meeting. We have an agenda, and the agenda's been posted. I was asked to make a change to the agenda. The change would add in general business an item B, and with approval of council on this, because I don't want to go forward with the posting it if council's not interested in discussing this. The city attorney hiring process has been ongoing, and there was an attempt to get that on there tonight to attempt to resolve some issues as a council discussion and try to get it done tonight so that we're not holding up on it. And I do support putting it on the agenda, but I want to make sure council supports that.
Yes, please.
Okay. So there'll be agenda item 7B, city attorney hiring process, a discussion. This brings us to agenda item 4, which is public comment. Public comment is an opportunity for anyone to express opinions or ask questions that are not part of the public hearings or part of the other business. An immediate response should not be expected. We ask that anyone who would like to speak during the public comment, please sign in on the green card that was on the back of the table there. It's a comment sheet that we use to call roll from. If you did not get a chance to sign, I always make sure that someone who missed it gets an opportunity to speak. We expect comments to be civil. Disrespectful behavior will not be tolerated. There's a 3-minute time limit. And I do have some signed in speakers. The first one is Jason Verzi. Good evening. If you could make sure you announce your name and where you live so that we know where it is on the record. Thanks.
Good evening. Thank you for having us here tonight. My name is Jason Verzi. I'm one of the owners of 38 State Brewing Company at 8071 South Broadway, 80122. I'm here tonight to formally request a variance to allow on-street parking on the east side of the 8000 block of South Park Plaza Drive, as shown on page 2 of that handout. As you guys may or may not know, we are a microbrewery located in the South Park Auto Complex, and we have parking challenges. And there's very little foot traffic where we reside, and ample parking is integral to our success in an industrial auto park. The South Park Owners Association does not own the streets. However, they have denied our request twice, and those denial letters are in that packet as well. South Park Plaza Drive is currently constructed to allow for on-street parking and has 4-lane width and is only utilizing 2 drive lanes at this time. The road is also equipped with pedestrian sidewalk, street lighting, etc. And on-street parking could actually make the road even safer. Included in that packet, we've also provided traffic counts conducted by a traffic engineer. Additional parking will lead to additional sales, which will lead to additional tax revenue. And I wanted to just take a minute, as I know time is short here, to point out a couple of excerpts from the City Council goals and objectives and policy statements. And that's to provide and maintain public infrastructure that addresses the needs of residents, visitors, and businesses. Recruit, retain, and assist businesses wishing to expand. And the city will oppose actions that hinder local economic development and job creation efforts. And also want to just take a quick minute to introduce the individuals behind me. To my left is Rob Williams. He is actually on the board of the SPOA and supports our movement to request for variance for on-street parking. And I've also got John Craig, who is our basically our resident architect, helps us with all of our infrastructure and planning projects over the years. And as you guys may or may not know, we are just coming up on our 3rd anniversary, May 13th to be exact. So both of these individuals have been very instrumental in our success thus far. And now we're asking you guys to assist us in becoming more successful. Thank you.
Thank you. And John is also signed up to speak, and so he would have 3 minutes to talk also.
Thank you. I'm John Craig. I live at 5896 South Crocker, so I'm a Littleton resident as well. I'm an architect, as Jason mentioned, and I happen to have been the architect for 38th State. I know that South Park Neighborhood Association is a great association that's had a lot of different uses and was designed kind of in the idea of a modality that doesn't exist anymore, which is a perfect street side that doesn't have any cars and doesn't have any traffic and doesn't really exist anymore. I mean, what we've learned, I think, with many different studies, and there's worldwide studies, particularly in the 21st century, that shows that activity in the street has to be multimodal, meaning pedestrians and cars and particularly different bicyclists, people with strollers, everybody needs to use the street. And when you look at South Park in particular, behind 38th State, there's no activity. It's trucks. And if you look at South Park Terrace Drive, it's used by only the distribution center and King Soopers. And if you look at the traffic study, there's not a lot of traffic. And it's not very granular, and it was done about 6 months ago. But what's interesting is South Park as a whole, you can't look at it as needing the same uses on every street. In this particular case, there's no use on the left or on the west side, and there's lots of needs on the right or on the east side. So what we're trying to consider, or have the City Council consider, is allowing a more walkable, safer environment by allowing street traffic to be slowed down, because people rip down the streets with empty traffic or empty of any activity. People just go faster. It's like a racetrack. So what we're suggesting here is that we make it more inviting by allowing people to start using it as a way of getting actually to the businesses rather than just allowing trucks be there. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And we have a copy of what you've given us. It will go to the city manager also. And that's where the conversation will start, with the city manager. Thank you very much. Comments, council? Thank you. Question?
Can I ask a couple? Is there specific dates and times of day that are more troublesome than others?
Yes. With the brewery, our peak business is typically from, I'd say, about 3 o'clock to 8 o'clock p.m. Our hours of operation are noon to 10, traditionally, through most of the week. And even then, it's the issue isn't so much on, like a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday. It's the time when the automotive businesses that are our neighbors are still open for business till 5 or 6 during the week, and we're starting to ramp up our operation around 3 or 4 in the afternoon. So you've got this peak time of, I'd say, from 3 to 6 p.m. weekdays is traditionally the the biggest obstacle we have to overcome.
And have you talked to the automotive places around? Because on the weekends, I was over there the other day, and Sterling, it appears as though they still are not allowing anybody to park there even on a Saturday if they're not even open. Is there any?
That is correct. Yeah, and the nature of their business is they work on a lot of high-end vehicles, and those spots in front of Sterling is the staging area for when customers come in and drop the vehicles off at night, maybe being worked on the next day. So yeah, for 3 years we've had that obstacle and that challenge and that relationship with Sterling, but we seem to be coexisting well. There are times though when we do have a bigger event that we do spill into not only Sterling's lot, but the Quiznos lot and Enterprise and the other surrounding businesses. So what our hope is by opening up this street parking is that you're not going to get vehicles that need to be repaired parked on the street. That's certainly not the intent. The intent is to help lessen the load on the existing parking infrastructure at the park by maybe having not only our customers park out there and overflow when necessary, but also maybe the employees of the businesses as well. Let's have them park out back, open up all the main, riverfront parking for all the patrons to all of the businesses.
Thank you.
Phil?
Jason, good to see you again.
Yes.
Hey, do you own the property or do you actually lease it?
We lease it.
Okay, and with that, did the property owner share the covenants with you that are attached to whatever deed there might be?
Yes.
Okay, so you've seen those.
Yes, I have.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. As I said, the conversation starts with the city manager now, and he has that information. And I understand the complexity of that because of the location that you're at with the South Park owners. So,
Thank you all very much.
okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jason.
Congrats on 3 years.
Cheers.
The next speaker is Jeannie Erickson.
Good evening, City Council. Jeannie Erickson. I live in District 1. Thank you for moving general citizen comments back to the beginning of the agenda, so we, the citizens, don't have to wait till 9 or 10 o'clock at night to speak. I would also greatly appreciate it if citizen comments could go back to 4 minutes, because not all matters can be completed in 3 minutes without speed talking. So I am now going to start speed talking. I watched your study session on February 14th where you discussed Geneva Village, the senior living apartments located directly west of here. There were many different comments made about what should be done with Geneva Village, which consisted of selling it to South Metro Housing, who is currently being paid to manage it for the city, put it on the market and sell it to whoever, and have the city keep it as they have since 1975, and keep it available to low-income seniors that want to live in Littleton. There was also talk of the burden Geneva Village was to the city. Of course, the apartments do need to be self-sustainable for the city to be able to keep them, which only makes sense. What I believe needs to be pointed out is that Geneva Village has its own fund, which all of the rents go into, and that is what's been used to maintain the property and the apartments. Back in 2009, the city needed money and took $421,000 out of the Geneva Village Fund. I appreciate the fact that Mayor Beckman did bring this up at the study session. And they also took money out from the fund in 2011, 2012, and 2013. The total taken from the previously self-sustaining Geneva Village Fund in those 4 years was $630,220. And this money was put into the City of Littleton's general fund. This total was provided by Mr. Doug Farman, the finance director of the City of Littleton as of 2016. This money was never repaid to Geneva Village, So I'm assuming that the money was given as a courtesy because the city was in dire straits, and that in return, Geneva Village would be taken care of regarding any future repairs and maintenance, and of course, that would be needed in the future. So please let it be known that Geneva Village was and is self-sustaining and has been all along until that $630,000 was given to the city because they were in desperate needs of funds. We should not take the generosity of Geneva Village Fund for granted. We need to take care of Geneva Village because they took care of the city when they were in need. I think those currently living at Geneva Village should be grandfathered in regarding the amount of rent that they pay, and any new tenants should pay the new amounts of rent so that they can continue to be self-sustaining.
Judy, you're out of time. I'm sorry.
I know. And I had a whole nother paragraph that was really good.
Don Bruns? It is not
Good
working.
evening, Council. Don Bruns, District 4. Walkable and affordable was a November 2012 Denver Post article on where millennials say they want to live. Almost exactly 1/3 each said urban settings, the suburbs, rural or small town surroundings. Now, nearly 5 years later, that wisdom no longer applies. Almost exactly 1 year ago, Colorado DOLA and the Urban Lands Institute generated demographics debunking the millennial home buying myths. They wrote, young home buyers are ditching city centers for the additional space and lower prices farther out. They get a better deal, they get more space, they want a yard for kids and dogs, they're close enough to city amenities, they don't work downtown or can telecommute, they see potential for resale value. A 2016 Youthful Cities Group study discovered 7 reasons why millennials are fleeing the cities. 1, cost of living. 2, lack of employment. 3, a preference for cars over transportation. Yes, RTD. 4, safety. 5, housing that has more space. 6, inadequate health care access. 7, improper access to post-secondary job skills education. Last year, Cicely Wedgeworth at Realtor.com wrote, you want a real estate resolution? We've got you covered. Next year, more than half of all homes will be bought by first-time homeowners. Most of those newbies will be millennials. Their chief economist, Jonathan Smoke, said, this represents an shift moment in housing. That's SHIFT. With so many first-time buyers in the market, competition will be even fiercer next year for affordable starter homes in the suburbs. For citizens as well as for council to get a glimpse of how far off council majority's love affair with Cracker Box development has been, here are some key projections for 2017, and I'm sorry the projector's not working. Homes in demand, condos only, 10% for millennials, 9% for baby boomers. Townhomes, 34% for millennials, 11% for baby boomers. Single-family homes are most desirable, 39% millennials, 71% baby boomers. Where buyers want to live, urban area only, 11%, only 11% for millennials, for baby boomers 5%, rural plus small town 22% millennials and 31% for baby boomers, suburbs and outlying suburbs 50% each. Adam Drucker at RCLCO Real Estate Consulting says the real problem here is that nobody in the home building industry is giving them a product they want. The overarching point is that their suburban municipalities haven't been as involved as they should be. Suburbs shouldn't just be thinking about attracting millennials to pay property tax. They need them here now to make sure the next generation of workers stays there as well. My hope is that this information plus the articles I provided each of you might help with turning council majority around so that our city avoids being a recipient of the Golden Cracker Box Building Award for community character uglification.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Or as the old song says, it'll shake your windows and rattle your walls, for the times they are a-changing.
Thank you, Don. And if I could comment on behalf of council on that, the problem in Colorado is just exacerbated by what was called the construction defects, now is called construction litigation legislation. And what it has done is, in the last 10 years, totally turned sideways that entry-level ability of new homeowners to be able to buy at the condo and townhome level, to begin to be homeowners and begin to build equity that allows them to move into houses. And this looks as if the situation will not be resolved this year at the legislature either. And that's why the city did pass an ordinance in order to reflect what would be a better way of dealing with the litigation issues and the homeowners' rights issues. But over 2.5 million of Colorado's residents are affected by local ordinances that have been passed like ours. And it was in the hope that the legislature would get the word and understand, but it seems as if it's not going to happen. So that is part of the problem also, where the economics are for the builders. It's not in the single-family homes right now.
Thank you, Mayor. There wasn't time here, but I'll just say briefly, I left you 7 articles. And
I see.
what really shows up in those articles is that they're not really looking for condos or even townhomes. They're moving into first-time homes, and they're not even interested in, single-family homes. They're not even interested in starter homes. And it is a huge change. And
Appreciate it.
there's a lot of information on it.
Appreciate it, Don.
Thank you.
And part of that problem also is the cost of the starter home is now exceeding the finances of the people that want to buy them in Colorado. It's really a bad balance. So thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have anybody else who'd like to talk? Frank.
Good evening. Frank Atwood from District 4. Representative Singer of House District 11 in Longmont has introduced a House Bill 17-1281, which tasks the Colorado Secretary of State to provide approval voting instructions for special districts and statutory municipalities to use approval voting in their elections if they want to. On Wednesday, April 19th at 1:30 at the Colorado House State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee meeting, the Colorado Municipal League plans to object to HB 17-1281 because they are not aware of any municipalities' support for this measure. I request that the Littleton City Council ask CML to change their position to support for this bill, HB 17-1281, because Council has successfully used approval voting to fill boards and commission vacancies. If members of the public would like to help in this approval voting effort, please contact me at 720-260-1493. Thank you, Frank Atwood. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Would anybody else like to speak? Carol.
I'm Carol Brazek. I am going to read Janie's last paragraph. She was going to finish with, we as a community tell a lot about ourselves, about how we take care of our seniors, and the compassion we show to those who need assistance with affordable housing. Social Security checks don't go up like the rates of rent have gone up in Colorado. Let's keep Geneva Village, as it has been since it was built, a place to house seniors in need of our assistance. I want to comment on something that Don Bruns just presented to you, because most of you know where I live, and I live in a neighborhood that I grew up in. Consists of about 40 homes. And the only time property turns over is when someone passes away or they get to an age where they have to go to Windcrest. They need assistance. And what we've seen in our neighborhood is really, it's kind of exciting. We've got young families buying these homes. We've had, one of them was purchased and then flipped, which boggles my mind in this economy that you can spend that kind of money on a home to flip it, but that's what they do. and a couple of the other ones have been purchased, and then they've gone in and modernized them. And I'm even experiencing the possibility that one of my children will buy the home next door to me. So what Don mentions is actually ringing true within my own neighborhood, from a neighborhood that had no school-age children to we probably have about 8 and possibly 10 or 11 in the near future. So I don't know where these young kids get their money, but they've got it and they're spending it and they're buying homes with big yards. Thank you.
Thank you. That completes public comment. Brings us to agenda item 5, consent agenda items. The consent agenda items can be adopted by a single motion. All ordinances must be read by title prior to a vote on the motion. Any consent agenda item may be removed at the request of a council member. Consent agenda item A is ID 17-86, a motion to appoint Benjamin Courier and Stephen Katzman as substitute municipal judges for 2-year terms and to provide compensation adjustments based on their 2017 performance evaluations.
Full.
Consent agenda item 5B is ID 17-89. It's a motion to appoint Loretta Huffine as substitute municipal court judge for a 2-year term. Agenda item C is ID 17-87, approval of the March 7th, 2017 regular meeting minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I move approval of consent agenda items 5B and 5C.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are you ready to vote?
Who got the second?
Jerry. Councilmember Valdez?
Okay. No. What press?
Okay. The vote is 6 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
This brings us back to consent agenda item 5A, which was pulled by Councilmember Clark.
I pulled this because I think I might have a concern, although I'm not sure, about the salary increase that's in here. What's being proposed is a 12.5% increase. And I don't have any information about what the comparables are or anything else related to that. I have no problem with appointing or reappointing both of the associate judges. I just don't, I'm not comfortable with voting a 12.5% pay increase without any kind of justification or background. So I guess there's 2 alternatives. We could move to appoint them and do a salary increase later, or we could postpone this and come back with some information about the salary increase. I'm guessing the salary is stipulated or called out in their contracts, although I'm not sure. So if it's called out in the contracts, it may be better just to postpone this and do it all at once.
Can I get the city manager to discuss this? He may have some information that would help.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and apologize that we got past this issue here in the study session, but it was our intent to share with you what staff's recommendation was, is to actually apply the similar methodology that we actually used with Judge Feldman. Now, we rounded up, I have to be honest. So back with Judge Feldman, we were looking at a 5% per year over a 2-year period. And so from $80 per hour, we just rounded it up, quite honestly, to 90. So that's how we got to that number. Then how does that kind of stack up against perhaps others? It's our understanding here that we're probably roughly about the average. And again, we can provide more data if that's the council's desire. But as I understand it, maybe the clerk here can help me. The range goes anywhere from $50 to $175 an hour. So we're probably a little less than average. But I'm not sure if we're near the median or what we might be. But that's roughly kind of the intent of what we had hoped to share with council last week. So again, I apologize for that.
Can I get a motion in a second?
Okay. I'll move to postpone this to What's our next regular meeting?
18th.
18th to April 18th.
We have a motion to move this item to April 18th. Do I have a second?
I'll second that out of courtesy.
Do we have additional discussion?
A mercy seconding?
I think that's what it was.
Do we have any additional discussion? Are we ready to vote on that motion?
Well, I'm feeling if Doug is winning additional information, this is not time critical, is it?
The contracts need to be done by 4/29.
So we could,
Have time.
pardon?
So we still have time.
Right. So I think out of courtesy that we should just postpone until our next regular meeting.
So we have a motion and a second. The motion is to postpone this item till April 18th. Without any further discussion, we can vote on this, and then we can go back to the main motion if necessary. A yes vote means to move it to April 18th.
The vote is 2 in favor with Councilmember Brinkman, Mayor Beckman, Councilmember Valdez, and Councilmember Cernanik voting no. The motion fails 2-4.
Mr. Chairman, I move to appoint Benjamin Courier and Stephen Katzman as substitute municipal court judges for additional 2-year terms effective April 30, 2017. And the city attorney is hereby directed, and the acting city attorney is hereby directed to prepare, and the mayor is authorized to execute 2-year contracts with Judge Courier and Judge Katzman with the compensation adjustment as noted in our communication.
Second.
So we now have a motion and a second on agenda item C, ID 17-87. Ready to vote?
The vote is 5 in favor with Councilmember Clark voting no. The motion carries 5-1.
This brings us to agenda item 6, which is ordinance for first reading. And we have changed somewhat our process over the last month. We are trying to take those issues which are most complicated and require the most amount of discussion and discuss them at a study session prior to them coming to the regular meeting for a first reading. So that's the case for these next 3 items that we're going to be discussing, I believe. Next two items. So this brings us to 6A, which is ordinance 5-2017. It's an ordinance on first reading for industrial wastewater pretreatment code revisions. And as I said, this has been previously discussed at the study session. If we have additional questions, we have the staff from wastewater treatment to answer them. Do we have any questions? Any additional questions? And we asked a lot the last time.
I think this process of study session on these kind of issues is excellent.
Looks like we don't have any questions of staff at this point.
Need a motion?
Sorry, you're all dressed up with no one to go to the dance with.
So I need a motion.
Not a problem.
I need a motion and a second then to approve this on first reading.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve an ordinance on first reading, amending the city's wastewater utility ordinance regarding the industrial pretreatment program, and schedule the ordinance for second reading and public hearing on May 16th.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Are you ready to vote?
Yep.
Are you ready to vote?
The vote is 6 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you for that in-depth presentation.
Thank you very much.
John.
Does that take care of the addendums also?
Let me go to agenda
yet.
item B, because we'll have the opportunity to ask questions if necessary for that one. Agenda item B is ordinance 17-2017. It's an ordinance on first reading for addendums to wastewater connectors agreement addendums and sewer service agreement addendums with connecting sanitation districts. And this is one that we also had it at this previous study session, asked a lot of questions, but staff is here to answer questions if we have them again. Do we have any questions? Phil?
No questions, just a comment here, particularly when we're dealing with this, is contact has been made with the other districts that are part of this broader service umbrella, and just wanted you to maybe comment on that and that outreach that has occurred.
With all the districts that are involved, we've actually been working with them for about 3 years now. It started out as a draft addendum that was crafted by plant attorneys and pretreatment staff that morphed as we worked with the sanitation districts over the last couple of years, incorporating their concerns into the addendum, ultimately reaching consensus, I think, among everybody that provides adequate delegation of authority, protection of the wastewater plant, and also I think it protects the sanitation district's interests as well. So I think we came up with a pretty good agreement that hopefully will stand as it is for several years.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Can I have a motion?
With that, Mr. Chairman, I move to approve an ordinance on first reading for the addendum to the wastewater connectors agreement and sewer service agreements with connecting sanitation districts, and to schedule the second reading and public hearing on April 18, 2017.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any additional discussion? Ready to vote?
Did we put this on 2 different dates?
May I speak?
Yes.
The municipal code revisions require public notice by EPA, 30-day public notice. So that second reading was scheduled because the first Tuesday of April and the first Tuesday of May are not 30 days apart. So it needed to fall to the next meeting after that for the 30-day notification. The addendums don't require that, the public notification, so they didn't require the separation in the timing.
But isn't there some interrelationship between the changes that we're making here and the ordinance changes?
Let me think through that. The code revisions are addressing EPA's requirement to implement delegation in the districts. So I think that it's okay to have the addendums put in place initially. The one thing that is mentioned in the addendums that we deal with in the code revisions is the fee, the $50 fee for inspections of facilities that the districts fail to inspect or refuse to inspect. It's not an issue on our part if you'd prefer to have that on May 18th as well, to have them coincide consecutively, but we had not identified that as an issue previously.
Okay, it just seems to me appropriate that if you're passing addendums that are based on changes that you're making in the code, that you don't pass the addendums.
Is that a friendly amendment?
Pardon?
Is that a friendly amendment?
Yes.
Accepted.
Okay. Which is to change the date to
May 16th.
May 16th? Okay.
And to the clerk, that'll solve the problem of the scheduling? That puts them both on the same date, is that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, so we have the friendly amendment to the hearing date of May 16th to the motion that we have a second for. Is there any additional discussion?
No, but I accept that change too, having seconded.
You accept that too, okay.
I think technically I need to, right?
We got a little whack here, I think.
Are we ready to vote?
Cool. Is there a question?
The only thing I'd like to point out is that we are implementing the same addendums with the Englewood districts. I don't anticipate that should pose a problem. Putting those are scheduled. We could bump those back. I'll talk to Englewood Council and see if they'd like to bump those back to the May 15th, so it would coincide with with these if you'd like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of Inglewood's choice on how they want to handle that. And I don't anticipate the ordinances not being passed. It just seems though kind of presumptuous to do them out of sequence.
Okay,
That's what my
thank you.
feeling is.
Okay. We are ready to vote?
The vote is 6 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for coming in. This brings us to agenda item 7, which is general business. We'll have 2 items, A, which was posted previously, and B, which is added at the beginning of the meeting. Item 7A is resolution, help me out, clerk, it says, is it 8, what is the correct, 08-2017?
Yes, sir.
I may have misstated it the last time, I'm not sure. But 08-2017. Resolution approving a memorandum of understanding between the City of Littleton and Littleton Englewood Wastewater Treatment Plant defining sanitary sewer interceptor ownership. And we have the Utilities Director and Acting City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Council. I just have a short presentation here to kind of describe the issue here. So before you tonight here is a resolution asking Council to consider approving a memorandum of understanding between us and the wastewater treatment plant, which we co-own with Englewood. And it's a little unusual because this particular piece of interceptor that we're trying to clarify the ownership has been in place for 40 years, and we find ourselves for some reason today trying to somehow define that. I have to admit this is a pretty unusual circumstance. Usually these kinds of issues are settled at the time of construction. So a little bit of background here. Of course, the wastewater treatment plant went into operation in 1977. Prior to that, a series of interceptors were constructed into the plant. And we were able to look at the records there, and we found some construction drawings from 1976 that would indicate that the city likely owned a piece of interceptor. And the real issue here for us is that, and I have a map here, that the section in question here, if I may use the cursor here, Santa Fe is off to the right, this is Dartmouth, and the wastewater treatment plant is kind of behind a fence in this particular area. The city had built this interceptor, and we clearly had owned and maintained the interceptor from the south up to the north to what we have this siphon in this particular location. Let me try that again.
Technology.
Yes. So we have always, sorry, it seems to be reacting to me here. I won't touch anything here except maybe the one button here, but again, the city had owned the siphon that's shown on kind of the bottom of this figure here, and we had clearly maintained this thing for 40 years. Then we had recently here last year a portion just outside of the siphon to the north actually collapsed. And that's when we discovered there wasn't really a clear definition of who owned this. And so there's roughly 700 feet between there and the wastewater treatment plant. And so what you see in the staff communication here is kind of a discussion about the history of that. So going back here, clearly the practice has been that you would have a clear definition of ownership here for any interceptor that comes into a wastewater treatment plant. I think there's 6 or 7 that actually come into the plant there, so this one does not have that ownership defined. We were able to find just one record, and it's pretty weak, I admit, but it's just nothing more than a series of construction drawings of the city's interceptor, which would indicate that through the Dartmouth area that we probably own that, but that's really the only record we could find. So there's a series of options that I guess the council could look at in this particular issue. One obviously is to do nothing, but obviously we're not recommending that because the pipeline is in need of repair. And we actually are poised to do some work on that pending the council's action on this. assuming that they find that we have the ownership of this. That's option 2. There, again, no real record of that, the ownership. We have maintained this thing certainly south of the siphon. Probably the most important piece of this is that there are no other connections between the siphon and the plant, such as Inglewood, which does run parallel with her own interceptor. So we would logically point to the city of Littleton as the ownership. The last option, quite honestly, is that you could look to the joint ownership of the plant, wastewater treatment plant, that would actually own an interceptor. Sometimes that is a practice. In order for us to pursue that option, we would have to go to the city of Inglewood and request them to co-own this with us. So that is the third option. It is staff's recommendation that the city go ahead and just accept the ownership of this via the MOU. Again, just relying upon a weak set of documents that kind of point to that, and probably the most important fact is that Inglewood's interceptor does not put any flow into this, and so that's our particular recommendation. Be happy to answer any questions that you may have on this.
So,
Go ahead, please.
So the only flow that's in this pipe is from us and our connector districts?
That's correct.
Okay. Second question is, and this may be for Ken as much as you, on the first page of the memorandum of understanding in the first sentence, would there be any problem with taking further out? So instead of this document further defines, make it this document defines?
Most appropriate, yeah, because there really isn't anything else besides this.
Yeah, that's kind of what my feeling is.
Yeah, good point.
Any other questions, Phil?
Yes, thank you, Director. With regard this, it says that we're going to own the interceptor, but I think it would be very appropriate to include all the easements that are needed to actually access this to repair, so that if indeed we are taking in ownership, we're not taking something where we're going to have to look at any further approval from Englewood to actually execute any improvements. And I didn't see that in the memorandum of understanding.
Excellent point. Actually, we do not touch on that, but that would be the next step, assuming that we take the ownership, is to go through the record here and look at taking whatever easements exist. It looks from kind of a quick title search, actually there are none. And so we may have to actually pursue a prescriptive right over this particular interceptor.
So why wouldn't we do that at the same time with this memorandum of understanding?
Well, first, in my opinion, what I was hoping to gain was council's support that we declare that we do own it, but then, yes, perfect the easements as a second step. But it does need to occur.
You have a construction schedule, don't you?
We do. Yeah, I think the staff communication, we have a slip lining, so this is actually all underneath the ground. There is no disturbance of the ground. We've been slip lining portions of this interceptor to the south here for several years, so this is kind of the last phase of that.
A question for the city attorney. On this, if we wanted to put a contingency on this ownership obtaining the easements to be able to repair this over time, would passing that as a contingency element and including that in any language that we go through, how might that work?
Let me make sure I understand your question. So if you authorize approval of the MOU tonight with the contingent upon the city obtaining basically an unrestricted access easement to have whatever access we need to maintain what we are taking ownership of. That's your question. Mm-hmm. Yes, I think you can authorize approval of the MOU contingent upon getting that language to the satisfaction of the city manager and the city attorney, and then it will be incumbent upon us to obtain that before the MOU is signed.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, if I may, I think there may be a challenge with that because we are poised to execute a contract for the repair of that. And if we're probably not in a position to delay it. So if we don't do the work, we're probably going to have to cancel the contract because the actual title work that's going to be necessary to claim the easements here is going to take some time. And we don't have that luxury within this existing bid.
Question. So my question would be, you have a pipe and it's underground.
Yes.
Above ground, is the ownership issues. Who owns that now? Do you have any idea of all the property owners along that route?
We do, yeah. There's only really a couple of property owners. Where the siphon's located is actually a construction yard. They use it for storage of their equipment, so there's really no structure on it. And then as it moves north, it crosses Dartmouth, so that's public right-of-way. And then I believe it's just vacant land north of the right-of-way. I can't confirm the ownership. I don't remember it at this point. And then obviously we get into the wastewater treatment plant.
And would your construction capabilities allow you to do all the needed construction from right-of-ways, public right-of-ways, and do it to pipes which were underneath land that we didn't particularly have an easement for?
We've actually, not in its entirety, because there's a series of manholes for which we have to actually access, and most of that occurs south of Dartmouth. And then the last stretch of that is from the south side of Dartmouth all the way into the treatment plant. That's the straight run. But the south part does require access into the storage facility. Quite honestly, they've been very cooperative. When we made the repair here last year, of course, there was a big hole, a big void. And so they brought that to our attention and obviously wanted us to repair that. So they've been very cooperative in trying to, address the maintenance of this pipeline.
Other questions, Debbie?
So if we don't approve if the MOU is only going to be approved upon gaining the easements, what if we don't gain the easements? Then who owns the interceptor? We've not taken ownership of it, so there's, I get it, we need the easements, but
I'm confident that we will get the easements because this pipeline has been in place for 40 years. And I'm let the city attorney comment on this, but as a prescriptive right, all we have to do is demonstrate 17 years, and so we can easily do that.
So would you recommend us just approving this MOU as is and not adding the easement issue on top?
That would be my recommendation. It's clear that nobody is going to dispute the responsibility of us maintaining this 66-inch diameter interceptor line. And so I think they would be very cooperative in wanting to make sure that we got whatever access was necessary to maintain it over time. And certainly that's been the approach of the construction company there on the south side of Dartmouth.
And then those easements would be contractual, ongoing, so we wouldn't have to continue
Perpetual.
to. Okay.
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
I admit it's rather unusual. I can't say I've ever come across something like this before.
Don't say that. You don't know what else is out there.
Underground.
Yeah.
Director, I find it uncomfortable to proceed with ownership without the unrestricted access for whatever repairs might be needed over time. Relying upon the mutual interest in seeing this as being done, I would say I think a phone call to City Manager Keck would probably, and the management team of the plant, there would be an interest in getting this done, but I'm uncomfortable taking ownership without the unrestricted access to allow for repairs over time.
There has been considerable discussion at our management meeting of the wastewater treatment plant. In fact, the city of Englewood is using the exact same contractor to do slip lining of their interceptor adjacent to this and into the plant. So the hope is that this contractor steps in, lines this section that we're discussing this evening. Once they're complete, then move right into the Englewood contract to do their interceptor and the plant work. So that is the hope.
So I'm confused now. Is the work that we have to do that is awaiting the contractor above ground work or simply slip lining?
Simply slip lining.
So do they need any access at all?
They do. They have to actually go into the manholes. If you've ever seen the process, you have to, on one end near the siphon, they're actually going to have a vault, a larger access in there where they can move most of the equipment and the material. Then as they make the bends through the manholes, they have to actually open the lid and move the material through that deflection and then start a new section through the straight. So the manholes are necessary to access from the surface in order to make those bends.
At this point, I'm looking, Jerry,
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
How much time are we talking per manhole?
Councilmember, I'm not sure, to be honest with you.
We're not talking about any length.
Oh, no, no.
I mean, we're talking about going there for an hour, 2 hours per manhole and move on.
I believe the entire contract, roughly, the work is scheduled from 2 to 3 weeks, beginning to end. And this is about 700 feet at 66-inch diameter. So it's a pretty good size slip lining project, but it's relatively short in duration.
So south of Dartmouth, that's maybe a third of the job right there.
Yeah, about a third.
Okay, thank you.
At this point, I'm looking for a motion and a second.
I move to approve the resolution approving a memorandum of understanding between the City of Littleton and the Littleton Inglewood Wastewater Treatment Plant, defining interceptor ownership and clarifying the maintenance responsibilities of the 66-inch interceptor pipe.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Additional discussion.
Yes, I'd like to offer an amendment to make it contingent upon receiving unrestricted easement access to allow for repair over time.
Out of mercy, I will second that.
Oh, jeez.
Okay. We have an amendment, motion and second. And could you restate that, Phil, for me?
It's an amendment to include that the ownership only occurs with obtaining unrestricted access to allow for repairs over time in conjunction with taking on the ownership.
Any discussion?
Yeah. I seconded it because I think it's worth some discussion. And, you know, if the pipe is carrying our sewage, then we're responsible for fixing it. I think we're responsible for fixing it regardless of the ownership, but the ownership clarifies, keeps the bickering from happening. I think easements or access to it probably will be an issue, but I think not. I mean, if we weren't get the easement, it doesn't change the fact that we're still responsible for the pipe and the maintenance of the pipe. It just complicates how it is that we would have to do it. So that's why I'm going to vote against the motion that I seconded. But
Additional discussion. Oh, go ahead. Mark?
Apologize. I suppose another alternative is if the council's comfortable, we can just go ahead and continue executing the contract, and then we can still pursue then the ownership and easement specifically after the fact. I was just hoping to kind of clarify the ownership up front was my intent, but that's another approach if the council's comfortable with it.
Well, my question is, I don't understand what the scenario would be of us having ownership and not having, I mean, us not taking ownership because we don't get easements. I mean, you still have the pipe there, you still have, somebody has to be responsible for it. So that's the part that I can't get over.
I just know how many times we've had situations where dealing with the county first and now Centennial on repairs on Broadway and trying to get cooperation on that front is one of those things where I don't want to be held up to do something that might mitigate further collapse and having to go through a time frame in garnering approval for something that we're taking responsibility for. I actually personally would have no problem taking on the ownership for the repair costs, okay, but I have problems taking on the long-term ownership without having the access.
Debbie?
The problem I see with the amendment is that it's actually on top of what Mark's asking, the ownership approval. I don't think that it's necessary at this time. I understand that the city will get the easements regardless, that that's part of the law, the legal of doing this. So that is going to happen regardless of this amendment. I think this amendment adds a layer to this ownership with the repairs that need to be done that isn't necessary. And I question, Mark, the work that needs to be done at this point, the access is only through the manholes. You're not going onto property, digging big holes, creating a situation where you have to go back and do repairs, or are you?
Only the one adjacent to the siphon is probably the most significant, and it is a pretty good-sized vault. We've already walked through this issue here with a property owner, so I'm confident that will not be an issue for them. Again, they've been very supportive. They want us to repair this.
I would assume that property owners would prefer repair of the sewer treatment lines, yeah. So I won't be supporting the amendment, although it's not an indication of my lack of support for gathering the easements legally ASAP.
Jerry?
Yeah, I don't support the amendment either. I'd like to see us move forward with this work and eventually get the easements where needed.
Any other discussion?
I hate to suggest this, but I guess there's a possibility that the easements may end up costing us.
May what?
End up costing us?
Theoretically, they might, but again, these same parties who want us to maintain this presumably would grant us an easement without cost for the sole purpose of access to do the maintenance. At least that would be our pitch to them. If they impose a cost on it, we have some leverage.
Maybe they'd pay us.
Yeah, we'll let it go.
Okay, unless there's further discussion on the amendment, we have a motion and a second to the amendment proposed by Councilmember Cernanek, which I'm not going to try to restate. Phil, if you want to restate that. Do you have that, clerk? Okay.
It's a motion to amend the main motion contingent on receiving restricted access to allow for repairs over time in conjunction with ownership.
Ready to vote? A no vote does not agree with that amendment. A yes vote would make that amendment happen.
The vote is 2 in favor with Councilmember Clark, Mayor Pro Tem Brinkman, Mayor Beckman, and Councilmember Valdez voting no. The motion fails 2-4.
So this brings us back to the main motion, which we had a motion and a second, and we were in the process of discussing. Is there any further discussion? Are you ready to vote?
The vote is 5 in favor with Councilmember Cernanek.
Habit?
Cernanek.
That sympathy overflow.
Not. With Councilmember Cernanek voting no, the motion carries 5-1.
This brings us to the general business, item 7B, city attorney hiring process discussion. And just the background is that over the past week, city council in one group, citizens in another group, and city staff in another group interviewed a series of candidates. And at the end of that discussion, met with Chuck Rohr, who is our contracted point person for the company that we've hired to do the selection, and asked him to work with one of the candidates and see if there was a contract that could be negotiated. That brings us really to the point that we're at today, and I believe some council members wanted to discuss some issues that may have arisen in terms of the contract. So I'm just opening up discussion. Do any council members want to discuss that? And then also, one of the items that I'm concerned that we may have to, it may be the best intent for us to verbally say whether we support it or not, is there were really several items in that contract. One of them is the starting salary, and contingent of that starting salary to another level after becoming fully licensed within the state. Another issue was moving and the things that are related to moving. Another was the cost of paying for those types of courses or fees that were required in order to become fully licensed by the state. And the other was a separation agreement stated in months that would be part of the contract. And those items were, to my knowledge, the things that might be something people might want to discuss tonight.
Can I suggest a possible course?
Please.
And that is we appoint either a committee or a person, and it'd probably be easier just to appoint the mayor to go off and handle the negotiations and bring it back to us, a contract. You know what our individual concerns are, and that might be more expeditious, thank you, than having these kind of approvals.
I'm comfortable doing that. I really depend on Chuck Rohr to know what the marketplace is and know what the various levels of pay are commensurate with the candidate that we have and those kinds of things. But I do know that we have a few issues that we would like to make sure he's aware of.
And I'm a little concerned that we gave general instructions and do not have how those are being looked at specifically at this point in time. So I've raised concerns with the now not present HR director, and I don't know how those have been communicated, and so I don't know how those have gone forward. If it requires direct communication or communication here, let me know on that front, but I'm a little concerned that there may be some specificity around some of this that I'm not aware of.
Didn't Julie say she was acting as the point person? Yeah, she is.
Okay.
We're covered.
Yeah, Julie is the point person, and Chuck Rohr is willing to take phone calls. I did call him today because I wanted to make sure that I understood where we were in the process. And he gave me information to me specifically, and I asked him if his phone number was available to all the council members to call and talk to and express their concerns to him so that he wasn't going through a middle person. He's the one who's doing the direct negotiations, and he was more than willing to do that. So I'm comfortable being kind of the lead person, but I'm asking council members each to call Chuck Rohr independently and get his information to you unfiltered through me.
Actually, I kind of think it'd be better for you to be the point person that's contacting Chuck. I don't know how the rest of you all feel, and
I'm okay with
and
that.
then we express our concerns to
comfortable with that,
you,
too.
and then you negotiate that with Chuck and or Julie, however that's appropriate, and then
I'm okay with that as well.
So I do
that
have a concern. Good candidates aren't just going to be sitting there hanging on the tree, waiting for us to pluck them off. Somebody's going to pluck off good candidates from the tree. So I'm hoping we can be somewhat expeditious in dealing with this.
I
I
agree.
agree too, Peggy. We need to move forward on these things. We can find reasons to delay these things till we get the perfect piece of paper. I would like to just see us get this thing wrapped up so we can move on to the next.
And I think actually having one person handle that might speed it up. That's what my
Can I suggest the mayor pro tem, please?
Pardon?
I'm comfortable with the mayor.
Any other concerns? Okay. Any other discussion? This brings us to agenda item 8, comments and reports. City manager.
No report, Mr. Mayor.
Let's do council reports and start with Councilmember Cernanek.
Yes. Over the last week, there's actually several weeks, there's been communication out there that one of our local students, Emily Rudnick, has worked with Savory Spice to create what is now known as Rud Spice. It's a chili spice available from Savory Spice. I think that's pretty neat that one of our local businesses indeed did work with one of our students, an entrepreneur on that front. Secondly, I know that in an upcoming study session, we will be covering some items related to what bills that are being taken up in the legislature that has some impact upon the city. One being in the area of construction litigation, as the mayor mentioned earlier, House Bills 1279, Senate Bills 45 and 155. Also the transportation referred measure 1242, as well as the Senate Bill 267 having to do with, and I'm worried about this one being a single topic because it deals with hospital provider fees, transportation funding, education funding, and special consideration for what's termed rural hospitals. Note the air quotes on that. And also the sales and use tax simplification being House Bill 1216. And then in addition to that, the two bills that are part of the dealing with transportation funding that are somewhat competing between the Speaker and the Senate President and what they've come up with. But there is a discussion at the South Metro Chamber the morning. It's at 7:30 in the morning on April 19th. It is open to the public for those, and both the Speaker and the Senate President have been invited to speak. They haven't quite confirmed at this point in time, but make those available to folks. Thank you.
Councilmember Valdez. Councilmember Cole.
In the interest of snow falling heavily out there, I will only encourage people, if they have not got tickets to attend the LPS Spirit Dinner this Saturday, they could contact the appropriate folks and support the LPS annual fundraiser.
Thank you, Councilmember Clark. Mayor Pro Tem Brinkman.
Just two quick things. The South Platte Working Group met this last week, and we're still working on the environmental pool. Littleton, fortunately, came right in and is supporting it, and the Inglewood and Sheridan city managers are looking to the leadership that Littleton showed in terms of valuing the opportunity to take it back to their council. So waiting to hear back on how that turns out. There are the Greenway Foundation is continuing to seek other opportunities. So in terms of getting that whole 50 put together. So that is on track, and I don't have the full list of those that are in it and being considered for it, but that looks like that is going to happen in a variety of ways. And then a while back, I had mentioned to council that the working group was working on some safety signage along the river that was specifically about river heights and what the CFS meant. When we have these years where there's a lot of runoff and we've got some pretty high flows, we also end up with some tragedies along the river, and we've had a number of those along our stretch, particularly as you get down into some of the more dangerous chutes. And part of what has been determined from that through a number of studies and also just plain common sense is that people don't understand what does 1300 CFS mean unless you have some perspective. If you're a water geek, you know what that means, but for, a bunch of 20-year-olds that just put a bunch of tubes around their belly and they want to go play in the water all day.
Fly fishermen too.
Fly fishermen too. Yeah, it's people that have that experience with the river. So we're not really, the signage isn't intended for them, it's intended for those that don't have that. And the original design had featured kind of a duck, sort of like the little yellow duck type look, and that did not go over well. And I'm telling you this because I'll be bringing back a visual display of what those signs, what we finally get the approval on. But this is why it's kind of taken a long time. So they put it in front of someone else to take a look at a different visual. So they came up with a river otter, and that seems to be very popular with everybody. And so it's a variety of signage, messaging about not drinking, riding, having a buddy in the water, how you navigate through falls and those types of things. We want to get it up before the high water this year, which is usually in June. So hopefully we'll have that laid out soon, and I can get that in front of council and take a look at it. And if you've noticed, we are starting to get the signage along the Mary Carter of the new signage that's going in regarding safety and usage and trail sharing, directional. It's, as all the signage is always met with likes and dislikes and middle of the roads, but it's going in.
It's more visible.
It's more visible. It's a lot easier to read. It's a lot easier for people to understand. There's a big, brand new, huge informational sign at Carson Nature, which is getting really good popular response because they're able to put more information up there. So hopefully we're creating an informational system that allows for higher level of safety and enjoyment out there. So thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, there was one thing I wanted to bring up. And that is, I think that Representative Singer's bill to have the Secretary of State set up procedures for doing approval voting, if any entity wants to do it, is actually probably a good idea. Home rule cities can decide on their own whether they want whatever type of voting they want to do. But if a home rule city wanted to do approval voting, it would be nice to have some guidance from the Secretary of State who thought through the process and gone through whatever rulemaking processes that they do. I would like to recommend that we contact CML and tell them that we would be in favor of the bill. I have no idea what the Election Commission is going to decide on approval voting or not approval voting, but if they make a recommendation to do it, it would be nice to have the Secretary of State's expertise on how to conduct that type of election and some guidance that we could then use or not use as we saw fit. So I guess I'm proposing that the mayor contact CML and say that there's at least one municipality that's interested.
Do I have council's support for, I'd call Sam Mamet directly and let him know. That's would see what
Just an observation that likely those will not come out in time for any November election this year.
Probably will not. And I have no idea what the chances of the bill are anyway, but if CML is opposing it because they don't know of any city that wants it, then we ought to at least raise our hand.
I'm not sure that's why CML is opposing it. And before I would agree to any of that, I would like additional information, maybe even from CML. But I'm not in favor of doing it at this point.
From my position, without seeing the bill and the final bill, and I don't want to support something that's not final. Although approval voting is something that we do here in the city anyway, and we can still continue doing it.
We're very close, yes.
Yeah.
How about if
We do it with boards and commissions in the community.
Yeah, we can make our own
That
rules.
is, we don't do a public form of that.
We can lead the way.
How about if we get maybe you call Sam and see what the issue is, and maybe we can get a copy of the bill?
Go online.
Actually, I would ask Mark.
Yeah, I was going to, Mr. Mayor, if I may,
Through Mike.
we certainly as staff can contact CML and try to obtain some information for you.
Okay.
So at this point, I'm in response to your question. This isn't really a council request of the director down there. It's more of a staff request to get more information. Are you okay with that?
Okay, that's good.
Okay, I've got a couple things. Our next meeting is going to be a study session next Tuesday, April 11th. We've got some things planned for that, but one of them will be to talk about an item that came up from the citizens, and that's to talk about Geneva Village. And there's going to be a presentation about that. We have some additional information. And I want to tell you that we have a well, and it works, and it's at Kettering Lake. And the people who live alongside the Kettering Park and look to that lake and the water, right now there's water in there, and I'm assuming it's in there because the well is putting some of it in. Is that correct, Mr. Manager?
It has added some water, Mr. Mayor, but most of it, quite honestly, has been just the winter runoff here. We did supplement here during a dry period, actually from a fire hydrant again. But now this thing is operational, and so yes, this is quite an accomplishment for us. It is designed and will operate to maintain that water level.
The grand opening and ribbon cutting will be Friday, April 7th up at Kettering Kettering Lake around the area. I think it's a meeting place will be the museum, if I understand. That's where people can park if the throngs of hundreds of people that want to see us see the well on Kettering Lake show up. But
The meeting place is what again? I'm sorry.
It'll be the historical museum.
But the well is not.
The well is directly east of the museum. There's going to be a wellness walk over to, I don't write these up. I'm just, there'll be a wellness walk over from the gathering place there where the parking is, so we're not parking in the neighborhoods, is really what that's about. And to get over there and cut a ribbon and enjoy some fresh fruit and bottled water and talk about the 850-foot deep well.
Question on that. As part of the incentive for council to have supported this was that there would be a potable water component to the museum area and the Kettering Park. Is that still part of it?
I think what I'd like to do, great question, and I'm not familiar with all of the history. I understand that was one of the desires here long-term was to try
That was one of the promises.
Yes, and I'm afraid with this first well, we will not be able to do that. The actual production of the well itself is going to be able to maintain the water level of the lake, and that is it. So it would take a second well in order really to accomplish the potable water issue there. I can provide more of a detailed report. We had Wright Water Engineers, of course, they were the ones who helped us design and actually execute the well itself. But the production, quite honestly, just did not meet what we had hoped it would, is kind of the bottom line.
It's unfortunate because that was part of the opportunity to repay the cost of putting the well in, was that we would have a substantial savings over a period of years regarding the water usage on that park. So it's unfortunate.
Yeah, a second phase, may be something worth discussing at some point, a second well, in essence. It all depends, I suppose, what we might be able to negotiate with Denver Water as a contribution to a project like that, similar to what we did here in the surrounding the Littleton Center. So there is still maybe possibility, but again, it's going to take definitely a second well in order to pull that accomplishment off.
With nothing further, we're adjourned.
Great.